Ayan, naka-login na ako. Thank you. Good evening. Hello, everyone.
Okay. By the way, this webinar is recorded, so you can watch it on Facebook sa UPPAF-RESPOND Facebook account. I think, is it also being live streamed in the CIC?
Yeah, I think we have it on our Facebook Live. I can confirm that. Let me confirm that with Alan. But yeah.
Are we on already? Not yet, no?
Yes, we are.
We are.
Okay.
Yes. So, Jubel, will you give the, or just whoever is going to give the house rules? Okay, these are the house rules. Participants other than the speakers and panelists are muted. If you want to ask questions, you can write chat. You can enter your question in the chat box, okay? Or in the question and answer tab. Okay, there will be an open forum wherein questions will be answered. And the last is very important. Please answer our survey. The link will be shared at the end of the webinar. This will help us improve our service or our webinars. Okay? And also indicate in the survey form if you would like to receive a copy of the presentations and if you need a certificate. Okay? So let me explain, let me welcome everyone first. I went through the registration, the registration data that were shared with me by Jubel. And again, we have participants from the north, up north to the south. We have people from Isabela, Ilocos, the Ilocos provinces. We have participants in, I think, Zamboanga, and a number of the Mindanao provinces and areas. We have one, I think, from Cotabato. So there have been a number of, so we are reaching a number of places in the Philippines. Now, so Jismaray na hapon sa Indogabos. I come from the Bicol region. So I don't know how many people from Bicol there are who are attending the webinar at this point. Now, the WGDP webinar series has been conceived as a vehicle to promote women's economic empowerment. It is organized by UPPAF-RESPOND. Henry will tell us what the UPPAF-RESPOND is, in partnership with the Philippine Commission on Women, to discuss and hopefully address key concerns of women entrepreneurs during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, 5 webinars is planned. This webinar is the first with the Credit Information Corporation, or CIC. And it focuses on women MSMEs access to credit. The next webinar, which will be held the last Friday of September, will focus on the concern of women entrepreneurs to move their goods, either it be their finished goods or their raw materials. So this is especially important for those in the manufacturing sector. Our Chief of Party, Henry, will be the main speaker for during our next webinar. The third in the webinar series will focus on interconnectivity and access to people to digital government services and e-commerce. The fourth will be on ease of doing business in registering businesses and registering land. And lastly, the fifth, which will be sometime in February, will be on alternative work arrangements under the new normal, including working from home or WFH. The RESPOND project is supported by a grant from the USAID. And as a USAID grantee, UPPAF-RESPOND has designed a program of activities in support of the US government's Women, Global Development and Prosperity, or WGDP initiative. RESPOND's WGDP program focuses on creating an enabling environment for women's empowerment, which is the third WGDP pillar, by removing restrictive regulatory barriers through gender-informed and gender-responsive competitiveness-enhancing regulatory reform initiatives. That was a long one. The enabling environment would also address the other two WGDP pillars, which is helping women prosper in the workforce and assist women succeed as entrepreneurs. At the same time, the UPPAF, or the foundation, UP Public Administration Foundation, Research and Extension Services Foundation, is promoting the twin goals of gender equality and women's empowerment of the Philippine Magna Carta of Women. So women's economic empowerment is an advocacy issue that RESPOND shares with the PCW and its key Women's Economic Empowerment Initiative, which we know here in the Philippines as the Gender Responsive Economic Transformation, or GREAT Women Project Phase 2, which is funded by a grant from the Canadian government and also shared by the CIC. Now, to go to the program, we will have the introduction by Dr. Basilio, Henry, highlights of the PCW survey on WMEs, followed by our main speaker, Jaime Garchitorena, on CIC access to credit and the CIC credit, the CIC doesn't belong there, access to credit and the CIC credit report, followed by the panel of reactors consisting of women who have graciously accepted our invitation from the financial institutions, and two also from among the women entrepreneurs. Then there will be an open forum. I thank those who have sent in their questions ahead of time, and I will be moderating it. And to close the session will be the Executive Director of the Philippine Commission on Women, Attorney Yuzon-Chavez. Now, may I call on Henry now, Dr. Basilio, to deliver the opening remarks. Henry?
Okay, thank you, Jeanne, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of webinars on women's economic empowerment that respond together with its partners. The Philippine Commission for Women is conducting. So let me acknowledge our partners for this important undertaking, starting with the Philippine Commission for Women, herein represented by its Executive Director, Atty. Kristine Yuzon-Chavez. And let me also acknowledge the presence of another partner, Ms. Carmen Lopez of the PCW GREAT Women Project, who will be one of our speakers for this webinar. Also with us is a longtime friend and partner, Mr. Jaime Garchitorena, the President of the Credit Information Corporation. Long time because our partnership spans for almost a decade, starting with a previous project called Advancing Philippine Competitiveness, or COMPETE. So Jaime will be our main speaker for this afternoon session. He will be tackling the issue of improving women's access to credit through CIC Credit Reports. And of course, let me acknowledge the presence of USAID, the United States Agency for Development, Ms. Badette Cariaga, who is supporting UPPAF through the RESPOND project. So Ms. Badette is the USAID's Gender Specialist. And also with us is Mr. John Avila, Project Officer assigned for the RESPOND project at USAID. Ms. Jeanne already gave you an overview of the RESPOND's gender-related activities. So she will be our moderator for this afternoon. She's our very own gender advisor here at RESPOND. What I would like to share with you this afternoon are the other policy and regulatory reform initiatives of the RESPOND project. Okay, so RESPOND stands for Regulatory Reform Support Program for National Development. Next slide, please. And as mentioned already by Jim, the project is being implemented by the University of the Philippines Public Administration Research and Extension Services Foundation, or UPPAF for short. It is the partner foundation of the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance. And RESPOND is a grant from the United States Agency for International Development. It's a 5-year project, and we just started last April of 2019. Next slide, please. The overall goal of the project is to enhance the environment for trade and investment by making it more open and competitive. And to do that, we have to enhance market competition by reducing barriers to market entry, and also strengthening the regulatory capacity and governance of our regulatory bodies by making it transparent and accountable. An overarching objective is the promotion of citizen engagement, especially in our policy and regulatory reform initiatives. Next slide, please. Okay, so briefly, I will just show you and present to you some of the major activities of the RESPOND project. So we are assisting the Department of Trade and Industry develop a national competitiveness roadmap. Now that we have COVID-19 and more we are being pushed to what is so-called the digital economy, we need to strengthen our e-commerce law to allow online transactions among businesses. And we are also helping the Department of Trade and Industry come up with the standards and regulatory framework for the manufacture of PPEs, which is important in combating COVID-19. Next slide, please. We are also working in developing the National Competitiveness Roadmap. We are working with the Institute of Solidarity in Asia with a group of former Finance Secretary Justice Estanislao to do regional consultations to be able to generate not only information but also commitment from the regions in support of this competitiveness roadmap. Next slide, please. Okay, so this work has to do with our desire to improve the regulatory processes, and also in line with the ease of doing business. So we are extending technical assistance to the Anti-Red Tape Authority, particularly in the implementation of the Nehemiah program. What is that? It's about national effort for the harmonization of efficient measures for interrelated agencies. So the goal of Nehemiah is to reduce regulatory burdens by 52% within 52 weeks, which is about 1 year. And RESPOND, together with ARTA, is now focusing on 5 priority sectors for reform. That includes food and pharma, housing and construction, logistics, telecoms, construction of telecoms towers, and energy and power. Next slide, please. We are also assisting ARTA in the development and preparation of the regulatory impact assessment. So this is a requirement of the newly enacted law on ease of doing business. So even before policies and regulations are issued, government agencies, both national and local, including government-owned and controlled corporations, are mandated to undertake regulatory impact assessment on the proposed policies and regulations. So we are helping ARTA to craft the RIA, or the Regulatory Impact Assessment Manual. And since the lockdown was issued in March of this year in response to COVID, a lot of regulations and policies were issued by the government to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are helping ARTA come up with a rapid regulatory assessment to look at these new COVID-related policies and regulations. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are also doing capacity building for the staff of the ARTA, particularly the Better Regulation Office in the areas of regulation and regulatory capture and the regulatory management system. Next slide, please. Okay, DICT, as I mentioned earlier, right now, the new normal is a digital Philippines, an economy that is more and more based on online transactions, whether it be e-commerce, telecommuting, e-learning, and even the delivery of government services through what is known as e-boss, or the electronic business one-stop shop. Okay, so, and to do this, we need to strengthen our ICT infrastructure, and we are helping the Department of Information and Communications Technology to improve and to enhance and put in place the necessary policies, like, for example, policy on spectrum management, cloud procurement policy, and even the access, open access in data transmission. Next slide, please. Okay, this is one of our activities with the DICT and the DTI on the launch of the National Business One-Stop Shop. Next slide. Okay, so as part of our work on improving governance and strengthening our regulatory agencies, we are extending technical assistance to the Governance Commission for GOCCs, particularly in trying to separate the conflicting mandates of some regulatory agencies. Next slide. Okay, so we are also extending technical assistance to the Philippine Competition Commission in doing studies that would identify industries and sectors that are vulnerable to anti-competitive behavior. Next slide. On one hand, inefficient regulatory processes impede the efficient functioning of our industries. And that's why our work with ARTA is looking at reducing these regulatory burdens. But the other part is has to do with non-tariff measures, no? Because we, of course, as you know, we trade with the rest of the world, with other countries, no? But there are certain regulations and policies that make it difficult, no? To facilitate a more efficient trade, no? Between us and our partner trading partners. So we are helping the Tariff Commission come up with a non-tariff measure roadmap that will address these trade barriers. Next slide. Okay, so I think I'm on my last set of slides. I would just like to highlight some of our COVID-related activities, no? Because RESPOND is also responding to the COVID-19, and we are helping the interagency task force to identify supply chain bottlenecks, no? Because as you know, when the government imposed the lockdowns, a lot of checkpoints basically impeded the efficient flow of cargoes. And to be able to address this and unclog the areas, no, in the supply chain that basically hampers the smooth flow of cargoes, we developed this supply chain analytics dashboard and mobile reporter app, no, so that we can generate information from the ground level and basically inform IATF and concerned government agencies, no, regarding these bottlenecks, so that appropriate measures and actions will be undertaken. So this is how the dashboard looks like, and it's basically housed at Camp Aguinaldo, where the National Command Center is located. Next slide, please. Okay, so the app is available at Google Play and App Store. If you wish, you can also download it at iatf-scan.net. So if you wish to report a supply chain incident, so you can use this app, and your report will be sent and received by the scan dashboard and processed for consumption by the interagency task force. Next slide. Okay, so like the webinar that we are starting this afternoon, we also have a parallel set of series of webinars, but this is one that is focused on supply chain analytics. No? And we organized what we call the Scan Networks Hub, made up of big industries, no? Like the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Philippine Exporters Confederation, the Supply Chain Management Association of the Philippines, and the Export Development Council. And so that all these large business industries associations can rally their membership, to be able to report areas or bottlenecks that impede the supply chain. Okay, so I think I'm almost done, right? Can you move to the last slide? Or okay, so yeah, so that's the last slide. So let me take this opportunity by also acknowledging the panelists, no, for this afternoon's webinar. We have Ms. Thea Rimando C, representing the food sector, Ms. Rani Eveningsen from the banking sector, and an old friend also, Ms. Georgie Pantoja, Georgie, no? So from Coffee for Peace, no? So multi-awarded NGO group. So we were also, had discussions in the past, during the previous USA Complete project about coffee production, especially in Mindanao. And then also Ms. Hazel Tan Lopez, representing the manufacturing sector. So let me end and wish you a fruitful webinar this afternoon. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Ms. Jeanne?
Yeah, thank you very much, Henry. I would just like to say that the Henry's second to the last slides will be the focus of the discussion, or will be part of the discussion on logistics, which is the next webinar in the series entitled Moving Goods. Okay, now let's proceed to the presentation of the highlights of the online survey undertaken by the Great Women Project Phase 2 with their women micro-entrepreneurs. Presenting the data will be Carmen or Carms Lopez, who is the OIC Project Manager of the Great Women Project. Carms would like to describe herself as a feminist, gender specialist, and development worker who is based in Manila. She has worked previously with international NGOs like the VSO, as well as with Gawad Kalinga. In 2013, she was awarded as one of the 50 outstanding alumni of the Manila Science High School for being a young achiever and for her work in social development and nation building. Carmen?
Thank you, Ms. Jeanne. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are pleased and thankful to respond and for this partnership with CIC for this webinar, to be able to present to you the results of the study we have conducted on the immediate effects of COVID-19 on women micro-enterprises enrolled under the Great Women Project. So as mentioned, I'm coming from the Philippine Commission on Women. So we are formerly the National Commission on the Role of the Filipino Women. Our agency was renamed PCW in August 2009, following the passage of Republic Act 9710, or the Magna Carta of Women that has been mentioned since the webinar started. So the PCW is the primary policy-making and coordinating body of the government on gender equality, women's empowerment, and the fulfillment of women's human rights. So it acts as a catalyst for gender mainstreaming and lead advocate for women's empowerment and gender equity and equality in the country. So this is basically our mandate for the information of everyone here present. So under the PCW, we have this project, our project, the Supporting Women's Economic Empowerment in the Philippines Project, or Great Women Project 2. And this is being executed by the Philippine Commission on Women with funding from the Government of Canada. So we have partners, the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Science and Technology in terms of national government agencies. And we also work with private sector partners. So we have partners such as Bayan Academy, EcoC Foundation, Socio-Economic Development Program, Multi-Purpose Cooperative, ZP MPC, based in Bicol, and the National Confederation of Cooperatives. So this project is all about improving the economic empowerment of women micro-enterprises and their workers. So in particular regions, I'll discuss that later. In this, because of COVID, so we all know COVID-19 has immensely and is continuously devastating nations across the world, including ours. And quarantine measures were put in place to stem the transmission of this disease. So in order to understand what was going on with the women micro-enterprises that we are supporting, we conducted this study to determine the specific immediate effects of COVID-19 on their enterprises. So we set out to understand their socioeconomic status, determine the effects of COVID on their businesses, and then also identify what are the common challenges they're facing present what are the gender issues, since this is our bias, to know if they are undergoing or encountering gender issues in their current status. And lastly, we conducted this to be able to know, moving forward, how can we provide a gender responsive, comprehensive, and evidence-based reference to improve services, technical assistance, and support for them. So the pandemic is still ongoing. So right now and even after this, hopefully. We use the following data collection methods. So electronic survey, which we did with Google Forms. And then we also did some semi-structured phone or online interviews and roundtable discussions via this platform, the same platform, Zoom. In our data collection, we were able to reach out to 53.07% of our enrolled enterprises. We have about 831, so 441 responded. And this response rate basically may be affected by various factors such as connectivity or access to gadgets or signals. Nevertheless, the target respondents were about 263, just to be able to have an ideal sample size and have a 95% confidence level. In terms of respondents, sex disaggregated data, you will see is that we were able to reach out to 91.61% of them are females. So the bias of the project that we have is that businesses should be women-owned or women-managed, or if they are being led by men, 50% plus one are males. So that's the reason why we have 8.39% who are males. So this is the breakdown. Our project is not covering the entire country, but most of the regions. So mostly Luzon regions, and then the entire Visayas is covered. But for Mindanao, we are only covering 3 regions. So, and more specifically, in terms of industries, we are but focused on 4 industries: coffee, cacao, H&W stands for homestyle and wearables, and then PFN-HVC is processed fruits and nuts and select high-value crops. So flour-based products, banana chips, mangoes, etc. So that's the breakdown. So we see that the representation is quite huge from Region 11. This is because we have enrollees from all 4 priority industries in this region. So effects on business operations. So these are just a few slides. So the status of their business operations, if you will observe now, the survey showed that majority or more than 60% of the respondents were not operational. So this is really sad. Or if they were operational at all, they were just 25% operational during the enhanced community quarantine period. So this is regardless of their level, if they are just starting, if they are just suppliers, or if they are already export ready. So it was not about their level, but it was more of it really showed that all of them, well, aside from these enterprises, all are affected. So although there was a number, if you will observe in this slide, there was a number who continued to operate despite the quarantine measures imposed. So the WMEs, as we call them, women micro entrepreneurs, remained 100% operational. So about 20 of them. This is a combination of non-food and food WMEs, and mostly from the data that we gathered, 70% of them are food WMEs. So as you all know, the IATF issued passes for food WME. So this can be directly related to that. So in terms of sales, we asked them, what are your anticipations in terms of sales? For sales, the survey showed that sales were reduced by either 25 to 75% for the WMEs. So, and a lot of them, a good 28.12% had no sales at all for the enhanced community quarantine period. So, you will also notice though that there are outliers, as we call them. 2.27%, their sales have increased. So digging into the data that we have, these were from the PFNHVC industry cluster, engaged in the production of desserts, sweets, and flour-based products. So this was further verified with industry clusters from these sectors that in some provinces, in some regions, the demand for cacao, for instance, has increased, and for flour-based products, maybe because they have seen it as a coping strategy. So eating sweets as a stress buster. So that was the feedback from industry players. In terms of available resources, asked if they still have capital to continue. So yes, 49.2% said yes, but a lot of them said no. So it's a 50-50 thing, but no, 50.8% is really a huge number. So in understanding their challenges, prior to this study, actually in March, we already had a rapid assessment. So we asked them what were they encountering as challenges, and in the hopes of finding out if these were applicable to most of the women, we came up with a survey and included 20 challenges and asked them to rate 5, like if they strongly agreed that this was a challenge for them, and then 1 for the lowest. So we calculated the mean averages, and these were the results. So in the rating that you will see, the number 1 challenge for all the WMEs is sales. This is applicable to all industries. Based on this, aside from sales, so they were not able to collect from clients actually. And then the next challenge that came about is the transport and delivery of goods because of the logistical dilemma well enforced by the proclamations 922 and 929 and implemented by the IATF. So after the delivery and transport of goods, other challenges were about money as well. So dues and obligations, and then access to other sources of income. You will notice down this graph, we also of course asked about their various challenges in terms of gender issues, no? So it came to, they also expressed that their roles and responsibilities at home and their sharing of these roles with other family members also was a challenge. So down the line, the lowest mean averages came from domestic violence and sexual harassment, but you will notice they were at 2.16 and 2.07 respectively. So in the case of this perception of women micro enterprises, it could mean that they could have lack of information about gender-based violence, or there was also difficulty in reporting cases. So sexual and reproductive health services also was a concern for them, although not the number 1. But this, as PCW, we're seeing this, that they were not able to go, afraid for their safety and health. Reproductive health services were available, of course, in the barangay health centers. But then these barangay health centers have been also transformed into barangay health emergency response team centers. So we see that the most most telling results of these challenges is that they are worried about their businesses, but at the same time also for their personal concerns. So the resources, this is the last portion of the highlights that I wanted to share with you. The resources that they need, very relevant to this webinar today, is that number one is access to financing, working capital or loans. So survey showed that this is the top resource that hopefully they could access. So women micro entrepreneurs under the Great Women Project are here now, present, also wanting to hear from CIC and all the other partners in this webinar, how could they better access credit, no, since they need it right now. Although second resource that they are looking is trade fairs. So all of these eventually, product assessment and development and then the e-commerce training would all only be possible if they would have access to finance. So further down the line, you will see that they are also looking forward to have access to support groups. Since they are very stressed right now, they want mentoring. They are really looking forward to spaces where they could learn and interact with other entrepreneurs. And also mental health programs and then access to child support services. So yeah, so it comes as number one, access to finance. And yeah, we hope to learn from the speakers and the panelists today on how women enterprises can better access these. Thank you very much. Hi. Ms. Jeanne, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. We shall now go to the next speaker, Jaime Casto P. Garchitorena, who is my kababayan. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the CIC. But prior to joining the CIC, he received his master's degree in entrepreneurship from the AIM and spent years as a small and medium-scale business consultant. Jaime envisions the CIC to foster a reliant credit data environment conducive to the success of MSMEs as part of the national strategy to promote inclusive economic growth, and also as an important part of the recovery program under Progreso. Under his direction, there are now almost 500 financial institutions, including universal and commercial banks. Rani, our panelist, comes from that. Cooperatives and microfinance institutions, or MFIs, that are submitting credit data to the CIC. As of now, CIC has 1,700 registered lenders and 519 institutions submitting live credit data. My call on Jaime now for his presentation. Sure. Jaime?
Thanks, Jeanne. And no pressure, sabi nga ni Henry kanina, sa lahat ng nandito ngayon, who was on cam, dalawa lang kaming lalaki. No? So very prone kami to be very careful about what we say. But on that note, it's an honor to be asked to speak, to be one of the thorns among the roses, kumbaga, to speak on this matter. And I hope that that we can approach this in a manner na the CIC is focuses on data, but the interesting thing about the data that we will present or can be presenting in the future with future engagements with USAID, UPPAF, is that can we show a particular trend in how women are treated in terms of access to credit? But that's further down the line, and that's one of the values of the CIC. The question at hand is, how do we improve women's access to credit through the CIC Credit Report? And normally, by the way, just to sound check, can everyone hear me well? This from our controllers. Jeanne, am I coming through clear?
Yes,
Yes,
Jaime.
yes, very clear.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So we can go on to the presentation now, siguro.
Miriam?
Okay, so as I mentioned, the theme today is improving women's access to credit through the CIC Credit Report. And under the subtitle is, I think, quite important to understand. The credit report as a tool for stabilizing business. So the first word is tool, because the CIC itself does not give credit, nor does it have any direct influence on the credit-giving institutions. But the concept of credit is reliant is very reliant on the perception of the lender as to the worthiness of the borrower. So we're in that space where the word credit worthiness comes into play. But it's not just credit data, just to be clear, it's not just credit data that is the element that is used to decide whether a person is creditworthy or not, but financial information and financial data that is both accurate and up to date is certainly one of the most important ones, if only because the transaction is essentially financial. In other words, pera yung pinag-uusapan dito, so dapat yung pinagbabasihan ng desisyon ay paano ba humawak ng pera yung tao? Paano ba siya magbayad? Lagi bang tapat? Minsan ba kulang pero napupuno naman niya? Or bungi-bungi ang bayad pero sa bawat bayad, puno naman ang nami-meet niya yung buong obligasyon niya. That is essentially what the CIC does. Now, normally, when I'm in the outer areas away from Manila, I like to start my talks off with one of two anecdotes. So I always say that I ask the audience, what would you prefer to have? 1 million pesos in cash given to you by a person, or 1 million pesos in credit given to you by an institution? And because of sometimes the Filipinos' reluctance to go into debt, sometimes the answer is cash. No, mas maganda na may cash. And my answer is always, I would rather have it in credit. Why do I want it in credit? Because number one, credit for me is unlimited. Even if I say I owe someone 1 million pesos, as long as that person keeps believing in me that I can continue to pay, regardless of whether I ask more. Kung naniniwala siya sa akin, gagawa siya ng paraan na pag humingi ako ng pera, bibigyan niya ako ng pera, because that's the power of credit. May elemento ng history at may tiwala. Now, on the other hand, cash, pag naubos na yung cash, pag naubusan na ng cash yung hinihinga mo ng cash, normally that's where it ends. And that's my first anecdote. I think credit is better than cash, and I think that's going to be very well illustrated ngayon sa panahon ng COVID, kung saan bumabagal yung pagpasok ng cash at naghahanap pa tayo ng additional cash para pumasok. The second one is an interesting, I think an interesting anecdote, a story. And it's about a man who is hiring a driver. And so there are 3 applicants to the job. And he says, he points them to a cliff, may bangin, no? Sabi niya dun sa una, how close can you drive my car to that cliff? Gaano kalapit mo mailalapit yung kotse ko sa bangin na yan? So the first one says, I can bring it to 6 inches. So sabi nung nag-hire, sige nga, patakbuhin mo yung sasakyan. So he takes the car, hinarurot yung sasakyan, he takes it within 6 inches of the edge. And the driver goes, see, I told you I could do it. The second applicant says, I can do it 3 inches. Mas malapit pa dun sa bingit ng kamatayan, ika nga, the edge of death. So the man who's hiring says, can you prove it? So the guy takes the car and he drives all the way super fast, 3 inches before the cliff. He stops, everything's good. So the third applicant says, with the third applicant, the man asks the question again, how close can you get this car to the edge of that cliff? And the third driver says, sir, kung kayo ang sakay ko, kahit 1 kilometro, hindi ako lalapit dyan sa bangin na yan. And the ending of that story is that the man obviously hires the person who posed him the less risk, because what he was looking for at the time was someone who would stay as far away from the cliff as possible. And I think that's a great illustration of what lenders look for in their borrowers. Who can they lend to, or who can they interact with in a financial manner that will keep them as far away from risk as possible? But there's an addition to that story that's not part of the joke, because at certain times, you need a driver that can take you to as close to the edge of the possible, and it will just be really a matter of trust. If he can really, one, keep you 1 kilometer away when you don't need to be close to the edge, but even as you're close to the edge, get you close enough that you don't fall. And I think that's a great allegory for getting credit during the time of crisis. Nung maganda yung panahon na lahat tayo kumikita, lahat tayo may pera, lahat tayo ay 1 kilometro. Ang layo natin sa bingit ng kamatayan. We are very far away from the edge. But now that we're at the edge, do you still deserve credit? Or can you still be the credit-worthy one? And so with those two stories, I hope you understand my perspective on where we're coming from, so that when I get into the less anecdotal, yung hindi na kwento na portions ng report natin, we can always see it in that context. So I'd like to go to the first slide, please. So as a borrower in these days, or as a person looking for credit, as shown in the survey, many are either out of money, more people are out of money than have money, and credit is number one. Now, what is the advantage and there is an advantage. Minsan po we have to look at the silver lining to understand the opportunities within the situation. What is the silver lining to COVID and the financial problems that entrepreneurs are facing? Well, number one, from a perspective of a lender, if you have 100 borrowers, but only one is in distress, then you can say, siguro yung one na yon out of my 100, siguro hindi lang marunong magnegosyo or waldas lang sa pera. So that kasi ang prueba niya, his proof, is that there are 99 others that seem to be doing well. But in the time of COVID, what we're seeing is an almost catastrophic impact to everyone. So, naging baliktad na yung kwento, no? Out of the 100 na pinapautang, 99 na ang may problema at iisa yung hindi. Similar to the survey as presented a while back about the great women, 2% seem to be doing very well because of a particular product that they sell. But the rest of the subset are not doing so good. The reason why this is a good thing is that there is context. Alam natin kung bakit nalulugi yung mga negosyo ngayon. Dahil sa COVID and all of the restrictions that seem to come with it. Health, social distancing, lack of transportation, bogging down of supply chains. We know why they're failing. So it's very good. There's context. Hindi nyo kailangan magdahilan. Now, one thing that also comes with that context is that the lenders are now forced to say, bakit ba hindi makapagbayad? Or bakit kinukulang ng pera? And it's not always as simple as kasi walang pera. It could be kasi walang pera, kasi walang bumibili. May produkto, merong tindahan, pero walang bumibili kasi hindi makalabas ng bahay. Or may nabenta, pero hindi makakolekta. Kasi either hindi siya pwedeng lumabas, lalo na for the smaller entities that do actual physical collections, or yung mga magbabayad sana sa kanila, hindi naman kayang magbayad. So that it is not their problem, it is not a native problem to the business, but yung merong circumstance around it. So also, I guess not for the first time, I mean, the DTI has been great in trying to promote entrepreneurship and small business for a long time. The government support is now positioned to be probably one of the biggest in history, no? Because of the massive failure. Nabigyan tuloy ng pansin. The government always says 98% of all our businesses are MSMEs, but this is the first time that it is highlighted because the MSME mechanism is beginning to slow down. The generator of our economy is beginning to slow down, and now they have to pump prime it. Kailangan nila magdagdag ng konting pondo sa ating mga maliliit na negosyante, MSMEs, para lang maiusad uli yung ekonomiya, para maialpas beyond this particular situation. So as a borrower, you can take comfort that we're all in the same boat. We know the exact context, so that when lenders look at you, there's a different context. You're not just a bad payer. They want to know how COVID has impacted you. Now let's go to the next slide. So ano naman yung challenges ng lender? Ito nga, sinabi ko na. There's such a large amount of failures that they become very nervous. Kayo man din, di ba? Kung nagpautang kayo sa tatlong kaibigan, tagwo 1 million, 3 million lang ang pera nyo. Pag isa nawala ng trabaho, maybe you can say, well, okay lang kasi yung dalawang pinautang ko, meron pa namang trabaho. Pero if all three of them go on a vacation on a boat and then you realize that the boat is missing, now your entire 3 million pesos has the potential for being lost. And just the sheer volume of it scares lenders. That's true, especially banks. No, banks have to lend you the money of other people. So very big ang responsibility na yon. But there's also an advantage. There's a bright side to this for the borrower. Lenders do not want to lose clients. In the past, when out of 100, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 clients fall out of good payment behavior, they can say, ay okay lang yan, isa-fuera ko na yan. Kukuha na lang ako ng bagong uutang. But in today's environment, that is a challenge. We know that the rules for lending have changed. The context for doing business have changed, and therefore the cash flow models have also changed, cash flow and revenue models. So the banks, far from saying, isa-fuera na yung apat, kung 96% of their loans, kunyari lang, these are not real numbers, I'm just trying to make an illustration, are in trouble, the thing that they want to do now is instead of aggressively removing the delayed payments, yung nakaka-delay ng payment o collection agency kaagad, now they have to look at their entire portfolio of potentially failing loans and look specifically at the borrowers in 3 categories. One is, who do I have to get rid of talaga? Sino talaga yung, kung ikarga ko pa to sa portfolio ko, mas makakasira pa sa negosyo ko? Then the second is, sino ba yung mga talagang tapat naman magbayad prior to COVID? At sa aming pananaw, in their analysis, it is COVID that is causing their issues. And with the government mitigations and the DTI mitigations and the various shifts in business plans by these agencies, they can possibly extend credit further. In other words, good clients deserve to be kept. And then now they're going to either lower your interest rates, extend your payment periods, give you some grace period, any one of those. And then finally, dun sa mga naman hindi nakakautang dati. Now, the problem with the lending industry in general, that the CIC was designed to solve, is masyadong personal-based ang pagpapautang. Just as a very obviously caricature, parang cartoons lang to, no? Dati, pag hindi mo kakilala yung manager ng bangko o hindi kaibigan ng kapatid mo yung manager ng bangko or hindi ikaw nag-aalaga ng aso ng manager ng bangko, hindi ka makakakuha ng utang kasi wala kang kilala. And in a large sense, that's still true. No? There's still a strong sense of reference. Saan ka ba nanggaling? Pero now, many financial institutions are looking forward to looking at positive flows, positive assets coming in from the future, and they now have to begin to consider markets that they have not considered before. But in order to consider markets both business and individuals that they've not considered before, they have to find new tools and new views of this new market in order to say that despite the fact that I have to throw away, and I'm using that term loosely, throw away a portion of my portfolio as bad debt, I have to restructure over time, which may reduce my near-term and medium-term returns and look at long-term returns. Can I find new clients that I can give credit to that will be adaptable already to the risk? Itong risk na to, itong bagong sitwasyon. Kasi everyone says that this will not change until we have a vaccine. And we're looking at maybe a 2-year horizon. No? So it's not a short-term issue that we're dealing with here. So the lenders themselves have to restructure their business in order to retain as many clients as they can, but also to find new clients. And that's a great advantage for people who have never experienced formal credit, but are wanting to get into the credit market. This might be a good time, but only if you can bridge that gap. How can I show the bank that I am a good risk in this new context of lending, right? And all of this, just as a side note, as much as the government is doing, and this is again a global phenomena, how long will funds from the government last in terms of support for MSMEs? At some point, and this is a natural progress, support from the government in terms of direct supports may begin to diminish. So what is expected is while the government support is at this level, the private sector is beginning to ramp its ability to reassess the loan environment, the credit environment, and say, okay, now we can take care of those that have to be restructured and onboarded. And so as the government might be diminishing their supports for MSMEs over time, we're finding that the private sector is adapting. And when I say private sector adapting, not just the lenders, but the borrowers as well. So as much as COVID is bad in the general sense, what it is forcing us is into a context of a more open mind and a more aware government that is now pouring in billions of pesos in support, but opening the minds of lenders, financial institutions, and also borrowers and businesses to how to manage their business in a manner that is equitable to the borrower and the lender. So that's a bit of a long introduction. Let's go to how the CIC can help you with this. So if you want to know more, by the way, about the CIC, you can go to our our website, which is www.creditinfo.gov.ph. And most of the information that I won't be able to tell you today will probably be there. So next slide, please. So this is, I tried to be as colorful as possible. I was playing a game, a board game with my daughter yesterday, and I realized that the quickest way to understand a board game is there with a lot of colors and paths you can follow. So I managed my presentation in that way, and I hope it translates to an easier way of understanding the CIC. So ano ba talaga ginagawa ng CIC? The CIC simply gets data from all legitimate financial institutions that are involved in lending, and puts it together under one database, under one roof na CIC. Now, pag pumasok lahat ng data nun, susuriin ng CIC, we will do matching. So if you have a borrower from financial institution 1 and by a borrower from financial institution 2, and the same borrower is financial institution 3, all this information goes to the CIC so that when that information is needed by either the borrower to prove his credit worthiness or other lenders that might want to check this one borrower for credit worthiness, or even just the institutions that are contributing themselves in their process of assessing the borrower, all they have to do is go to the CIC and draw that data from the CIC para makita niya. Now, the advantage here is that ang kinokolektang data ng CIC is fact-based. Anong ibig sabihin fact-based? Unang-una, hindi lang lahat ng negative. You've heard of databases out there na puro negative lang. Negative list or blacklist na tinatawag nila. The CIC collects both negative and positive financial information and puts it in a single document that we call a credit report. Now, what a credit report is just think back when your days in school. A credit report is a report card. And you can think of all the borrowers that you're exposed to as your teachers in school, and all of them give separate reports, A, B, C, D, E. And at the end, you might get an average QPI or grade point average. That is exactly what the CIC does. But additionally to that, it collects certain demographic information like addresses or phone numbers. And even these things are valuable because number one, it establishes a pattern of behavior. Did a person move from a low-income area to a high-income area? If he's in a low-income area, does it matter if he's been there for 20 years? Because that shows stability. Has he changed numbers? Has he moved from prepaid to postpaid? And all of this, we present not for the intent of those analytics, but leave it up to the lender to decide if this information is relevant to them. Now, just to give you comfort, the CIC has spent millions and millions and millions of pesos to protect its database. So from a data security perspective, your data is well secured. But aside from that, the CIC is also exempt from the Data Privacy Act as far as its data collection and data processing is concerned. And that's important because if the goal of the CIC is to create a comprehensive database, hindi naman natin pwede sabihin na yung mga masamaang utang o hindi marunong magbayad ay pwedeng magsabing, ay ayokong pumasok dyan yung datos ko. So it was very important to make sure that not only did we get positive and negative data para balanse naman yung impressions natin ay nagpapautang, pero we must get from all lenders sa lahat ng mga nagbabayad o lahat ng may utang. So in a nutshell, that's how the CIC works. Now, if we can go to the next slide. And by the way, this material will be available. So if you like pretty pictures, you can feel free to use this. So how does then this benefit the ordinary person? So you can see in this model, you see the loops, the gold loops that we had where the financial institution submits data to the CIC, and the CIC sends data to the financial institution when it's required by the financial institution. In the same way, a borrower or a potential borrower can go to the CIC. We have an online facility for this. In fact, we now have our credit bureaus available to give you credit reports, hindi lang yung CIC. But the potential borrower can go to the CIC through our web-based channels and say, I would like to see a copy of my credit report. I want to see what the banks or other lenders have been reporting about me, because while I do not need money now, I might need money in the future, and I'd like to see what my report says about me, and I can prepare myself, I can prepare my documents so that I can become a more acceptable borrower to those future lenders. So these are institutions. Kung may utang na kayo sa bangko, kung may credit card na kayo, kung meron kayong exposure sa co-op o sa MFI, there's a good chance that your data is now with the CIC. Now, where does this become particularly interesting in the time of COVID? Well, number one, in the time of COVID, I mentioned that one of the things that lenders are going to look for in your credit behavior is what was your credit behavior prior to COVID. In other words, bago ba mag-COVID, okay ka na magbayad. Or and when I say okay, please don't see that as an absolute check mark. Kasi when I say okay, I mean, do you fulfill the obligations of the lender to his satisfaction and to meet your obligation? Kunyari, meron kaming mga scenario dati nung we were in a place where madaming OFW. So merong behavior, for example, yung isang umuutang na every 3 months lang nakakabayad. Kasi every 3 months, nagre-remit yung kanyang asawa galing sa abroad. So, hindi nga siya nakakapagbuno nung 2 months, pero tapat na tapat naman every 3 months. So when we say good, that's not for anyone to decide except for the lender. So by the borrower being able to access his credit report, he can check if his financial records are correct. Now, and this is a very strong proof, lalo na if you get access the credit report through our credit bureaus. We have this thing called a credit score, and we'll get to that later. Pero yung ano naman yon, yung credit score naman is, if this were back to the report card, puro meron kang mga A, may mga B, may mga C, may mga D. Pero yung average mo, makukuha ng credit bureau para pag nagtanong ka sa bangko, pwede ba akong pautangin? Ang sasabihin nila, ano ang credit score mo? And pag nakita nila ang average, and I'm using the word average again loosely, kung ang average credit score mo ay B, kung papasa ka sa credit standards nila na B lang ang pinapautang nila, na ganyan, pasok ka na. Pero at least alam mo kung paano ka matatanggap, at alam mo kung bakit hindi ka natanggap. But it also provides another vehicle. Paano kung mali yung nakalagay sa report mo? Marami tayong mga umuutang na may kwento na gano'n, hindi daw na-record yung bayad nila o nagbayad naman sila pero hindi umabot daw sa financial institution. The CIC has mechanisms to assist the borrowers, and we have an explanation for that as well. And then finally, what if you're someone who has never borrowed money before? Because then we're talking about new clients, right? New clients of banks or new people who want to start businesses. If 2.6% of the survey respondents say candies and sweets are the hot item during COVID, and you expect COVID to last for 2 years, a new person might want to say, hey, I want to start making candies for stressed people at home. When you inquire with a financial institution that submits data to the CIC and accesses data from the CIC, kahit wala ka pang utang, pag mag-inquire ka for a loan, papasok yung datos mo sa CIC website. Whether you are sa database, whether you are granted a loan or not. And even if you are granted a loan but you refuse the loan, sabi mo hindi mo pa kailangan, gusto mo lang sumubok. Yung pag-utang mo or your attempt to get credit is already recorded in the CIC, and that's very important as well, because sometimes it helps the lender to know that you have a digital footprint even if you didn't avail of the data. So it's very important, I guess, before I move to the next slide, that the credit report not only provides a document that shows your history of payments to lenders and to potential lenders, by the way, but once engaged, if you have the energy to engage with a financial institution and make a formal loan request, your name gets encoded into the CIC database so that at least your name is established, your gender, your date of birth, your address, so that when you borrow finally from an institution, they'll know that whatever document you present, your IDs, your TINs, these can be verified in support of the CIC report kahit wala ka pang nauutang. So that's, I think, a very powerful tool right there, whether you have loans or whether you don't have loans yet. Next slide, please. So I mentioned credit bureaus before, and they stand in between the data subject and the CIC, the borrower and the CIC, or the financial institution. On our website, if you go to our website today, you can actually apply for a credit report and choose any one of 3 credit bureaus so that you can get not only your credit report, but you can also get a credit score. So just to be clear, the CIC does not offer credit scores. We just output credit reports. But if you want to try it, please go to the website. You'll understand there the process of getting a credit report and credit score. And I encourage you to do so. So that you'll find out more how they work by going to the website. So we can move to the next slide, please. Again, it's www.creditinfo.gov.ph. Next slide, please. So how does this all work? And this is where I drew inspiration from my from my daughter's game. So you can start anywhere, like all good games are. You have 3 starting points. You have the blue line, the red line, and what looks like an orange line. Let's start with the orange line, let's say, so that we can complete the story. Let's say you want to apply for a loan. You follow the orange line, marked 1A, and you go to a lender that is submitting and using data from the CIC. The lender then follows the gold line, 2A, and queries the Credit Information Corporation, merong bang utang si borrower? Let's just call him Jaime na lang para madali. Meron bang utang si Jaime sa ibang bangko or ibang nagpapautang o wala? The Credit Information System through line 3A, also gold, responds to the lender with either no hit or walang datos, walang utang si Jaime naka-record dito, or may utang at ito yung mga utang niya. The bank then, either on its own or with support of the credit bureaus, analyzes that data and in line, and this is very important, in line with all other credit policies that they may have, not just the report, but all other credit policies that may have, sends in the green line, 4A, sends the applicant a rejection or acceptance letter. Now, what's the next step? Now, let's say the borrower gets an acceptance or rejection letter at nakita niya rineject siya sa kanyang utang. And it will say there in the paper, yung rejection paper. Dati kasi pag nare-reject ka ng bangko or nagpapautang, sasabihin lang nila, something in our internal policy does not allow us to give you credit, or some generic message to that effect. Now, if the data subject knows that the CIC's data is being used, they have the right to ask the bank, bakit sila hindi pinautang? Again, a very powerful tool that are in the hands of the borrower. But before doing that, it is usually advised to go to the CIC to get your credit report para makita mo din, tama ba yung report na tinitingnan nung bangko? Because you never know, kahit na submitting entity sila, kahit na kumukuha sila ng datos sa CIC, they may not use the CIC data for whatever reason. They might have internal policy. Again, it's not mandatory naman kasi. So the borrower can then, following the blue line, go to the CIC to get their credit report. And as the CIC sends them back their credit report, they can look at it and says, oh, mukhang kumpleto naman lahat ng bayad ko. And then, or they can go to get their credit report through the credit bureau, that's the box that overlaps the blue line, and says, hindi lang bayad lahat ng utang ko, pero mataas pa yung score ko. So then the data subject can go to the bank and say, why did you not lend me money? Now, the bank is not obligated to lend you money, or the lender, but it will help to understand when you ask why, right? And especially if they use the credit report for their assessment, they can probably point to any number of things in your credit report that may elicit maybe a high score or a medium score, but is not in line with their internal credit policy. Baka you're over-leveraged. Baka magaling ka nga magbayad, pero sagad na yung pag-uutang mo. So it's not just about having a bad report. It might be because also you don't fit certain financial criteria based on your exposures. Now, what if you find out na mali pala yung laman ng credit report mo? And that's the red line right there. You can go to the CIC, again, online dispute resolution process. By the way, I'd like to emphasize that most of this, if not all of this, is going to be online. So hindi na tayo mahihirapan pumunta, COVID or no COVID. You can get your loans online in some cases. you can get your credit report online, and you can even file your disputes online. So you can file your dispute online with the CIC. The CIC has a dispute resolution mechanism, and hopefully we're compliant to ARTA. And within 20 to 40 days, depending on the technicality of the dispute, you should get your credit report fixed. And if the CIC sees that it can tell the lending institution na may maling datos tungkol sa'yo, to tell them to change the report, they will change the report in the next submission, and within 30 to 60 days, naayos na yung credit report nyo. Yung CIC pala, I forgot to mention that the CIC requires submission every 30 days from all financial institutions. So your data is never old. Hindi luma yung datos nyo. Kung nagbayad kayo ng isang buwan, dapat pumasok na yung bayad na yon sa report nyo. Kung hindi pumasok yung bayad nyo, pwede nyong ireklamo sa CIC through the online dispute resolution system after getting your credit report and seeing na hindi pumasok yung bayad. And then the CIC will facilitate a conversation between you and your lender to make sure that the problem is resolved to everyone's satisfaction. So this is, again, very overview of the CIC. If you want to learn more, go to our website. Next slide, please. So, are there gender-related challenges in generating data? Because there was a question, I know there's a question floating around there, na, is there sort of like a gap between women and men getting credit, and is that relatable to the generation of data? Next slide, please. So one of the challenges of smaller enterprises, and I'm using a very anecdotal, no, ito yung extreme, that when looked at from a gender perspective, since it's women, since this is a women's conference generally, I'll just use the female gender as to illustrate a disadvantaged personality versus the male gender. So let's say we have the stereotypical women at home, men going to work. And the woman at home has a great business. She's the 2.6%. She's selling sweets. She's doing it online. And she's making a good living, but she wants to expand her business, or she needs credit because her current line of retailers or yung distribution niya, hindi pa makapagbayad or hindi siya makolekta, but she has an online platform for getting, let's say, online payments. So she's looking for additional credit. She's never had any credit before. Laway lang dati ang puhunan niya at napalago naman niya yung negosyo niya from that limited scale. And then she goes to a bank online, let's pretend, and says, I want to get a loan. Now, whether online or physical, one of the questions will be, how can you prove revenue? Now, if you cannot prove revenue, you're going to have to excuse me a second. I'm going to have to turn on. Okay, I'm good. Medyo nag-low bat yung computer ko. Sorry about that. So the entrepreneur has no proof kasi sa bahay lang siya. Wala siyang proof of employment, wala siyang payslip, wala siyang ID kasi hindi naman siya lumalabas ng bahay. Let's say she's very home-based. Now look at this in contrast with the male gender. Again, just for the purpose of this conference, I'll separate the two in a very distinct manner. Si lalaki, kahit na mababa lang ang sweldo, kahit mas malaki yung kita ni babae, si lalaki may payslip. Meron siyang employment record. Kung kumuha siya ng office loan, meron siyang record through either yung payroll account niya. At malamang meron siyang TIN, SSS, and GSIS. And so this alone, very anecdotal but very illustrative, shows na how the female gender can be disadvantaged in terms of getting credit if she cannot generate data about herself and her enterprise that is adequate for the various lenders to give her credit. Now, this is where the whole ecosystem of lending is very important. Microfinance is very, very important because it engages in arm's length lending. But until very recently, arm's length lending, ibig sabihin lang po, nagpapautang siya dun sa mga kapitbahay o may limited geographic range. Kilala kita kaya kita pinapautang, mabibisita kita para makita kung yung negosyo mo ba'y lumalago o hindi. At pwede pa akong mangolekta sa'yo ng face-to-face kasi nandun ka lang sa barrio natin o sa sitio natin. The MFIs are very critical. And again, I apologize to all of my MFI friends. I'm sure that's a very stereotypical view of MFI. I know you're larger than that, but it's just to illustrate the point. Yung mga MFIs, until recently, hindi po yan nagsasubmit ng data sa CIC. So kung si babae, umuutang lang sa MFI, hindi siya talaga wala talaga siyang record na galing sa CIC na mapapakita sa ibang nagpapautang that might need the CIC as a credit record to show proof of revenue. So the disparity between the ability to generate data is, for us, the CIC, highly dependent on capturing financial transactions related to credit across the entire roadmap or the life cycle of an entrepreneur. From the smallest formal borrower to the largest formal borrower, dapat makuha namin yung datos para kung kakapasok mo lang sa small lender, kasi small borrower ka pa lang, habang lumalago yung negosyo mo, nare-record lahat ng datos mo sa CIC at lagi mong pwedeng ipakita to the next largest financial institution that you need to borrow money from. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show this. This is one of my homegrown illustrations. The life cycle of an entrepreneur actually doesn't start in the start a business to fill a gap. The life cycle of an entrepreneur, actually nag-uumpisa yan bilang consumer. Kasi nga we get from credit cards, and normally ang credit card wala namang kinalaman sa negosyo yan. That's a personal transaction. It is you having a non-collateralized relationship with the credit card company. And for us, we know two things. One is small businesses, lalo na yung mga nag-uumpisa pa lang, hide the business expense in terms of credit in non-business loan context. So yung mga nagsa-special purpose loan, home improvement loan, sometimes car loan, vehicle loan, and definitely credit card usage are areas where starting entrepreneurs get their beginning credit. So it's important for the CIC to capture credit for MSMEs, not just at the MSME level kung kailan ka nang nagne-negosyo at meron ka ng business loan, but also to capture some credit-related consumer behaviors. In the US and in many economies, one of the first points of credit, in fact, is a credit card. And that credit card might even be an extension card of your parents. Because as long as what you want to do is, as early as possible, establish a credit footprint, even as a consumer. Now, in some economies, extension cards might not be the thing, but some financial institutions do have credit cards with values as low as, let's say, $100, 5,000 peso credit cards. I don't know if we have them here. I know there are 50,000 peso credit cards, but normally this is an inroad into getting your credit data. And by the way, credit companies do submit their data to the CIC. So starting entrepreneurs have to make sure that if they want to borrow money now or borrow money in the future, to establish a credit footprint. And normally that's done through some low-level credit like a credit card, or start with your MFIs. And this credit footprint will follow you through your cycle, whether you want to start a business to fill a business gap that you see in the market, to sustain a business, or to grow your business. The question will always be, should I spend cash for this now, or should I get credit for it later? Then the next question would be, who should I borrow from? Should I borrow from a formal lender, or should I borrow from an informal lender? And then, of course, if you go by way of formal lender, how much collateral will that formal lender ask from you? Now, the more credit history you have, it is likely the less collateral they will ask from you. The less credit history you have, the more collateral they will ask from you. And that's very relevant. And that's where, again, we come in with credit information, where all of those questions can be answered by the credit report itself, as well as, and I cannot emphasize this enough, other credit giving standards that the lending institution may require of the borrower. So I go back to the title. The credit report is a tool. This is not a silver bullet. Hindi po ibig sabihin na magandang credit report nyo, siguradong pautangin kayo. No. Hindi dahil mataas ang credit score nyo, pautangin kayo ng financial institution. Hindi din. But it is a powerful tool to prove that you are creditworthy. Marunong kayo magbayad, tapat kayo magbayad. Kung hindi kayo nakakabayad, humahabol kayo ng bayad. And I think that's very important to understand. Next slide, please. Actually, we might be able to, this is just a reiteration, no, na kung si Mrs. umuutang, ano yung magiging pruweba niya? Si Mr., proof of employment meron siya. So we can move on to the next. Next slide, please. I guess it boils down to this. What information will your lender trust? And again, the CIC is hopefully one of those things that the lender will trust. And I think as many financial institutions that are already using our credit report, it is becoming a a trust entity. No? It has become a tool of trust, if you want to call it. Next slide, please. How do we know that we can achieve all of this? And this just very quickly, sasabihin kasi, nung nag-umpisa kasi ako, sabi ng mga entrepreneurs, oh, magagawa mo ba talaga yan? Masasabi mo ba na magbibigay sila ng datos? Yes, we have an enabling law. Batas po ito, kailangan nila magsumite. May technology platform po kami. Hindi po, napakadali pong gamitin ng platform. Basically, pag may internet connection lang po kayo, tapos yung spreadsheet ng lender, I'm talking about the lenders, nakapag-comply po sila, nakapag-submit ng data. Yung channels of distribution namin, we're really targeting 100% online. So as long as you have a mobile phone and through our credit bureaus, you can get your credit report. So tatapot po yun sa mga online lenders. And I know that there's a lot of controversy about online lenders, but certainly, like one of our speakers today is from a very reputable bank, and I know they're trying to move, or if they moved already online, and I think that can be a good synergy there. We have educational campaigns to educate the borrower, go to our website. And then finally, we also have yung online dispute resolution system. Pag nadedehado kayo sa credit report nyo, mali yung pag-submit ng data, meron kayong pupuntahan na online din. So in other words, if you're one of our participants from Tawi-Tawi, as long as you have internet connection, within the next few months, you should be able to do all of the transactions necessary to get your credit report from the CIC all online. So that's our commitment na kahit nasan ka, kahit sino ka, basta meron kang internet connection, pwede mong makuha yung credit report mo. Next slide, please. Let's just skip this. I think this is, I've sort of run through this. Next slide, please. Okay, so para lang mapakita, and I mentioned na I really like pictures. So this is like a summary, no? Ano ba talaga ang role ng CIC? So pag ordinary times, if you're all the way to the left of the slide, maliit ka pa lang, merong information gap. Hindi naman alam ng bangko na nagpapautang kung gaano ka kaganda magbayad. Kasi nga, let's say, generally informal pa lang ang lending mo. And so, ang perception nila sa'yo is mataas ang risk to lend. And there are two ways to manage this. Over time, let's say you stick with a borrower, you find a borrower that's going to lend you money. Over time, paganda yung reputation mo sa kanya. Pero sa isang borrower lang yon. And we know that as a business grows, you might need more than one lender. And so what the CIC's role is to narrow that information gap over time. You're already narrowing that gap with this one relation with a financial institution, but the CIC supports this by proving to the new borrower, to the new lender, na meron nga kayong record at nanggagaling sa isang source na mapagkakatiwalaan, which is the CIC. So that follows you all through, whether you start as a micro, nasa small ka na, nasa medium. That's what the role of the CIC is, and you'll see that in this next slide, where we position the CIC to fill the information gap. So will there ever be a time that you won't need a credit report? That's entirely possible. Pag let's say entrenched ka na sa mga lenders mo, pwede kang, hindi na kailangan. Humingi ka lang ng pera, pautangin ka na. But then we come to the time of COVID. And again, I think that's what we're trying to mitigate here. Your information will now be more viable because the financial institution recognizes a potential massive failure of loans across its entire portfolio and has to decide who to remove, sell off, or close, or manage in whatever way possible, who to retain para mapahaba yung mga terms nyo or mapababa yung mga interest rates over time, or who to onboard as new clients. The next slide, please. Can we? Next slide. Sorry. Yeah. So sa panahon kasi ng COVID, nawala na yung slope, no? Yung slope assumes over time gumanda na yung credit report nyo. Pero ngayon parang wala nang tamang rule. Kung restaurant ka dati na kumikita, you can only accommodate 30% of your capacity. If you had a 100-seat restaurant, you can now accommodate 30 dahil dapat social distance na lahat. If you're a nail spa, how do you manage the health risks to your lender, to your customer? If you're let's think bigger. If you're into food, if you're into fresh food, if you're into agriculture, how do you now show that your business model is still viable if there's no transportation to be had, or lockdowns or other government frameworks might get in the way of your business? So all the rules have been changed, so the risks are now disproportionately high. All the previous rules of risk mitigation are possibly have been broken or changed. And again, what's important is the credit information that you had in the past. The CIC collects data not just now, but it stores data as old as 3 to 5 years, depending on when your borrowers were onboarded. So it will be fairly easy for your borrower today to look at your history, and with the help of a credit bureau, if the financial institution gets the support of a credit bureau, can build a risk structure model based on scoring. And then even if you know, when you find out, let's say na mababa yung scoring mo, the beauty about that is with advice from your credit bureau and advice from your bank. Let's not take the banks out of the the lenders out of the equation. You still have to prove your sincerity to them. Kailangan lagi niyong kausap yung mga lenders nyo, whether it's a leasing company for cars or a bank for a business loan. You have to be in constant contact with your bank because they're using other people's money or they don't want to take on that risk. But the CIC should be able to help you with their historical credit report, and the credit bureau should be able to help you with the score. Now, the last few slides will be just some of the stuff that we're working with the USAID UPPAF. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we can skip this. So we're diving into our database, and we hope to be able to give the gender-oriented research groups and even the government policymakers some views into what we can see now into the credit information that you have. How can we move forward? How can the CIC help you as a woman, understand, are women being treated fairly? Is there equity? Ms. Jeanne's latest discussion with me, equality versus equity. We may be treating everyone the same, but by treating everyone the same, we disadvantage one over the other. So what are we finding now? And by the way, all of these are non-definitive yet. This has not yet undergone full analysis. Wait, sorry. I guess you used version 2, but that's okay. So what we have here, madali lang naman to. What we did is through the help of our IT team in the CIC, and Ms. Bon Bautista and Ms. Eileen Amor Bautista are also listening to us. They're part of my team. Thank you for this slide. We can see here, if you look at the stats that we're coming out with, the best so far, and I use the term just in relation to the numbers that you're seeing now, the best lenders in terms of number of female borrowers versus male borrowers seem to be microfinance, with a disparity of 87% female borrowers and 13% male borrowers. Now, again, this is very raw data, but this is something that illustrates how we can help the cause of women and credit in the future versus, let's say, co-op banks that have 21% female and 79% male. All of these numbers that you can see here, it's very important for us to begin validating these numbers, because then we have to be looking into the data and see whether is this a policy issue, is this an accessibility issue, is this an opportunity issue, or is this even an educational issue? Do people within the service areas of these financial institutions, are the women aware of their potential to borrow and how to borrow? Now, the thing that Ms. Jeanne was trying to get me to do, and I will make this available on the slide. Now, pag binigay to sa inyo, please make sure to contextualize this properly. This is raw data that still has to be verified. We just want to illustrate how the CIC might help you in the future. Now, Ms. Jeanne was asking me, Jaime, even if 87% of microfinance borrowers are getting loans, 87% are women versus men, what are the ratios naman of the loan values? Kasi baka nga mas maraming pinapautang na babae, pero baka mas mababa naman yung loan values. So that's seen in totality. What is the average loan value of male versus female? Now, I had those numbers. I think we just got confused in the presentation piece, but that's the only difference between these two presentations. And so I think in some cases, I can't directly recall now, but in some cases, there were instances where the men were actually getting bigger loans. No, mas malaki nga. Let me see if I can look at my own thing here. So let's look for one that's slightly skewed. Well, I can't read that fast, but maybe we can discuss it later with Ms. Jeanne, because we both have the numbers to man. So these are the kind of things that we have in the future, though. So in the present, what we have is a credit report. In the present, what we have is a credit score. In the present, what we have a dispute resolution system that will help those with loans be able to properly contextualize and to present themselves to banks. On the other hand, for those that are new to credit, by applying for credit, you can enroll your name in the credit database so that then you can understand how to, that your name is now in the credit database. And then by going through if there are any future webinars or going through our website or even just talking to your borrowers. It's here pala. Thank you. Thank you for that. You can see, let's go to the slide. Okay, universal bank. So for example, 59% are female and 41% are male. But according to our records, the average loan to the female is 605,000 and the average loan to the male is 1.2 million. That's interesting, and we'd like to verify that. But that's just again to show you how we plan on using the data moving forward. So just back to my point, so I can wrap up. I know I've been rambling on for too long. The CIC is here to help. Credit reports are here to help you contextualize your exposures to the lenders. A credit score is here to provide an empirical analysis through a credit score that might be valuable to the lenders. For those that have no credit yet, please attempt to borrow money, because I think there's nothing wrong with trying, but that will actually establish your credit data point. And moving forward in the future, even the credit bureaus will have supports for how to improve your credit scores. Now, just as a final note, COVID-19 has disrupted everything, from your business model to the lender's lending model. We're all in a learning curve, and as much data as we have, including the policies of the lenders, this will be very important in helping you extend your credit or get new credit. There'll be a greater reliance on analytics. Data will be here. Relationships can be managed. Kung pagkakaibigan lang, I'm sure we can lend our friends money. But when it comes to, will this person pay us back? That's the question. And so data will be very important. Generate as much data as you can. Make yourself credit visible. Pay your taxes. Get a TIN number. Get a tax identification number. That's the best data point that you might have if you're a starting borrower. And then finally, when talking about supply chains, sometimes I think credit reports in the future, before you establish a supply chain, not just you as a borrower and as a business owner, you have to check the credit worthiness of your suppliers as well. Because if you are not at credit risk as a distributor or a manufacturer of the product, your supply chain may be at risk if they are not within that credit-worthy space. So that's it for me now. I'm sorry again for taking too long. I love this topic. I could talk about it forever. Like Doc Henry said, we've been talking about it for 9 years and it's still fresh today. But I hope I gave some insight that there are many supports for female women's lending, and the CIC is certainly one of them. So thank you very much for the time, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Jaime. At one point, I was debating whether to send you a message. You're running out of time. But then the discussion was very interesting. So I just let it go. At that point, I shall now call on the members of the panel of reactors. I shall ask first the panelists from the CIC submitting or accessing entities, and then the two women entrepreneurs who graciously accepted our invitation to share their experiences and the challenges they face, and how the discussions of the CIC Credit Report could address a major concern of micro and small women entrepreneurs. Now, for our first reactor, we will have Rani Rules-Veningsen, who is the current head of retail and SME credit risk of Union Bank of the Philippines, one of the submitting and accessing entities of the CIC. She has more than 20 years of experience in local and international banks in the Philippines and other Asian markets, focusing on credit risk and analytics. Rani?
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the panelists. Actually, while I was listening to Mr. Jaime, I'm agreeing and basically nodding all the time to whatever he's saying. And I guess there's not much I can add to, because he has explained it very well, no? So maybe I'll just give a perspective from the banking industry, or at least from how we do things in Union Bank and our partnership with credit bureaus like CIC, where we only started as a submitting entity, and recently we've been accessing their data as well. So as Mr. Jaime has already mentioned, it is really parang a changed world with this pandemic. But the general rule of thumb for credit remains the same. And sorry, for the next slide, please. Yes, so in terms of traditional credit assessment, that's still part of our key role in able to lend or to provide funds or additional capital to our customers, whether it's a retail or micro or SMEs. So we have been obviously using the traditional credit assessment, getting access to the credit bureau history, i.e. the CIC. So we look at the person's character, assess in terms of if there's a collateral available, and also the paying capacity. But there is, the next slide please. There is also recently more information being made available across the banking industry as well as the external environment. So that's where yung data analytics becomes very powerful. So we do profile customers and use alternative information also. So in reaction also to the presentation a while ago, that what are the common concerns of the customers or borrowers when it comes to making their businesses thrive during this pandemic. It's still having that available information, whether in their credit history, but also alternative like yung utility bills ba, nababayaran ba yon, yung mga mobile plans, even your Meralco, water, that becomes a very useful information when we assess credit. Kasi in the absence of a history or credit history, those are the alternative information that we can look at to be able to profile the customer accordingly. And next slide, please. And Mr. Jaime already touched on this in terms of the supply chain. Particularly now, there are certain customers, especially the micro ones, ang daming relevant dependencies. So they might have the product, but if they need packaging or they need to deliver the product to their end customer, that's basically a simple supply chain by itself. So besides the fact of we're also looking at what's the credit behavior or credit history of the other players in their supply chain, we also look at what's the viability of the continuation of this borrowing customer to continue providing or being able to pay the loan if one of his suppliers or one of his logistic partners suddenly cannot deliver. So for example, during the lockdown, if there's no way for raw materials to be delivered to him, then may problema. Magkakaroon ng problema in terms of actually producing the product as well as delivering the product to the end users. Next slide, please. And the last bit that I just wanted to highlight, and very recently, this has been very important in our credit assessment. It's the proof of resiliency of the industry as well as the business owners' viability to sustain yung business niya even with this lockdowns and the pandemic, even if it progresses or lengthens in terms of its effect. So we've seen a number of customers na, and I think it supports the survey also a while ago, na there are certain customers who are quite resilient. Although it's a small proportion, there are 4-5% also that we see in our customer base that just continued on with their normal business. And most likely these are the essential well, tagged as essential services or products even during the lockdowns. But definitely, there's a big chunk of the customer base who had been impacted in one way or another, and some even closing down, that we noticed in our customer base. So it's something that us in the banking industry, we also don't want that to happen to our customers. Not because they probably have loans with us, but some of them, or most of them, actually have deposit relationship with us. So our relationship with the customers is not just on the lending side, but also on the liability side. So we wanted to make sure na continuous yung business nila throughout the impact of this COVID. But then again, we really cannot foresee much of into the future. So we just have to profile, and that's where the data profiling or the data analytics also come into play. Who are the least impacted or least affected, and who's quick to recover, or who will be slow to recover or very late into the recovery process, maybe 1 or 2 years before we can see that they will go back to their pre-COVID stage. So in a nutshell, from a banking perspective, it's not just the credit history, but that's definitely a very important factor that we're looking at. But we also have to be open to other information that's available out there, especially now that there's a lot of the customer base that are actually unbanked. So we have to reach out to this market as well, whether they do have credit history or they just simply have a savings account, and some of them don't even have a banking relationship. But we still need to make sure that the bank is part of the engine that will move the economy to recover faster. Next slide, please. And I saw a while ago that there was a question in the chat group about where can they source the funds if they're going to have a business venture or additional working capital for that matter. Traditionally, obviously, the banks is one of the sources, but there are informal lenders also that was already mentioned a while ago by the speaker. So it can be family, it can be friends, it can be anything, or even loan sharks. But that's the traditional channel. But then, next slide, please. There are also new channels that are coming up. And this is probably shameless plugging, but this is more of having additional channel that you don't even have to go out of your comfort zones or in your houses. So now that people are basically staying at home, everybody's online, there are many, many venues or channels that you can tap into if you need from 50,000 to $1 million kind of loans for your businesses. And I'm just not talking about the ones that are supported by the bank, but there are also lending or wallets, the mobile wallets, or as well as the online shopping. The ones that I mentioned here is about the Lazada, but there are others also that you can tap into that have offering of from your micro or small enterprises that would need additional capital or working capital para masustain yung production that's needed, or in some cases, it's actually a replacement of what used to be a regular salary, or for those who were previously employed and are now moving into entrepreneurship. This is one way of actually looking at where can I source the funds. So basically, that's what the reaction to this is. But the good thing, by the way, and I don't want to miss this one out, is the government, particularly our Bangko Sentral, has been very, very supportive to kickstart the economy. And when I say supportive in terms of giving reliefs to the banking industry or to the financial institutions for that matter, there are many reliefs that have been provided, including having field guarantee that's a government agency that to guarantee a certain portion or all of the loans that are being lent out to micro or small enterprises. So it's something that definitely the government is supporting, and the BSP is looking at having more of the financial institutions to be able to provide to the market para ma-kickstart ulit yung the SME industry that we have. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Rani. Now, I shall call on Hazel Tan Lopez, who is the Department Head of Sales Administration of Toyota Financial Services Philippines. Oh, I'm lost. Sorry. And she has been in the auto loan industry for more than 12 years. She handled nationwide sales business of Toyota Financial Services from 2012 to 2016, and currently oversees credit application underwriting, initial loan contract evaluation, and vehicle appraisal. She is also a $1 Million Roundtable financial advisor and a certified investment solicitor. Hazel? No sound. You're muted. Okay.
There. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I totally agree with Mr. Jaime with regard to the importance of credit information, both to borrowers and to lenders. Basically, I would just contextualize it to the auto loan financing industry. We in Toyota Financial Services always adheres in providing value or added value to our customers. So in relation to auto loan application, what is it really for you or the borrowers if you have existing credit information? First, efficiency in processing time of your application. Well, everybody or every customer wants a speedy process. If you already have an existing credit data, well, a more streamlined application process is available for you or for your application. This would imply faster application turnaround time. This will result to an immediate credit decision, thus less waiting time for you. So second added value, those borrowers with existing credit information have better access to current promos of Toyota Financial Services. What do you mean by this? When you have a matched CIC credit data, which tells us that you have a good financial record, then you are more inclined to be offered with existing promos such as lower down payment or payment holidays. On the same breath, if credit data provides benefits to our customers, it also has its advantages to the lenders or Toyota Financial Services in particular. First, risk mitigation. With existing credit information vis-a-vis our company's credit parameters, it would be easier for us to gauge the creditworthiness of our borrowers. Second, there's also efficiency in our process and in terms of cost. With a more streamlined process for applications with CIC matched data, well, less manpower may be employed, thus less manpower cost for our company. Second, lesser turnaround time for each application would also mean bigger volume of processed application in a day, thus productivity is maximized. And third, utilization of CIC data actually alleviates the challenges in information gathering and verification brought about by the stricter implementation of Data Privacy Act. Well, without the CIC matched data and limited verified information, we tend to resort to field investigation, which is actually costly. With positive match data, on the other hand, we can do away with this field investigation cost. By the way, our match date or hit ratio is now at 73% from an average of 44% upon uploading of the data expansion recently completed by CIC. And we're very grateful and appreciative of that. Well, in summary, with more credit data in the system, it will be a win-win situation both for the borrowers and the lenders. And in relation to the general points raised by Mr. Jaime at the latter part of his presentation, my takeaway would be, yes, during this crisis, validity of CIC data may lose its relevance in determining the probability of default of certain borrowers, particularly on the industries severely affected by the pandemic. But the benefits of CIC information, as it provides historical data of borrowers, will always serve its purpose to Toyota Financial in terms of process efficiency as an integral part of TFS application process. For my slide, okay. Basically, gender is not a variable to credit approval. Nevertheless, allow me to share to you some of our data on our female borrowers. So we received more male borrower applications prior to pandemic, whereas during the pandemic, we have the same percentage of male and female borrowers applying for car loan. For the source of income, there's a large disparity between employed and self-employed borrowers for both genders. The prior averaging at 73%, were the latter at 27%. And during the pandemic, employed borrowers further increased with more female borrowers at 78%. Based on TFS active portfolio, 53% are male and 46% are female. However, more female applications are being booked in the last 3 months with a breakdown of 51% female and 49% male. In terms of delinquency ratio, if you're wondering, 90% of TFS female borrowers are updated with their loan payment. That's 1 percentage point higher compared to TFS male borrowers at 89%. So next slide, please. So actually this graph is quite interesting. Between ages 20 to 30, more female borrowers are availing auto loan. But this behavior changes during their 30s. Number of male borrowers increases and the gap widens as they age. I believe some of the reasons are, as the head of the household, the man normally takes the responsibility of securing the family vehicle. It's also possible that some women, on the other hand, who were previously active in the workforce or business, may opt to be a housewife or establish a relatively small business as her sideline. So here comes the picture of men still employed or with a growing business, basically with formal workplace, which results to having better documentation necessary for loan application. But nevertheless, with all this data, we can generally conclude, not necessarily speaking for the whole auto loan industry, that men and women have a fair share in terms of access to credit. That even in this pandemic, women are empowered to secure an auto loan. And because of this, they're actually part of the growing data system of CIC. So that's it for Toyota Financial.
Thank you very much, Hazel. So we have two parts, as it were, two types of financial institutions. One is a bank, and one is financing and leasing company. And I think because sometimes during the time of the COVID pandemic, what some of the micro entrepreneurs might, some of the MSMEs, what they might be interested in is actually getting what I call a trucklet or a vehicle that they can use to transport their produce instead of being dependent on some transport providers. Now we shall go to our two entrepreneurs who are in the panel. I shall call first on Georgie Pantoja, who is a social entrepreneur. As Henry has pointed out, she has been our partner in the Compete project. She started her business in Mindanao promoting peace through coffee. She said that she intentionally called her corporation Coffee for Peace to raise awareness of our consumers on the issues faced by coffee farmers in conflicted areas. Coffee for Peace started in 2008, that's 12 years ago, and has been recognized and awarded for their efforts in promoting quality, clean coffee, and the culture of peace through their advocacy. May I call now on Georgie?
Hello, good afternoon po. I'm looking the lens of an entrepreneur. So listening to all those things that we have discussed, I really appreciate Mr. Jaime's presentation. Very, very clear, no? So it cut across for people who understand credit rating, who have access to internet and all those things. But let me take you to where I'm coming from. Kasi I deal with on the farm level, on processing level, and also we have coffee shop. So on the farm level, so I deal with farmers. So sa mga farmers, during the COVID, you still have to buy their coffee cherries kasi patuloy pa rin nagbubunga yung kanilang puno, and at the same time, ang mga farmers, they wanted to have income right away. So sa framework ng farmer, cash is king.
Right.
There are more of cash basis nature, no? So to transpose them to a credit rating, parang napakahirap kasi kailangan makita nila from that day, yung kinita nila at kano yung gagastusin nila. Easy lang sa kanila yung plus minus loss or plus minus positive, may income. So ang lagi nila sinasabi akin, failure kapag negative yung income. So kung gusto man nila mag-expand, may mga challenges. Paano kami makakakuha ng credit kung kailangan ng collateral? Paano kami makakuha ng credit kung hindi kami nag-document, hindi namin alam mag-document? Ano ba yung i-document? Ano ba yung kailangan i-document? Another thing is, wala akong birth certificate kasi hindi ako nakaregister.
Fundamental problem.
Okay? So, no identity. Paano na yan? So, yung mga ganong problema, how do we deal with them? So, are there ways wherein the government really help para ma-educate ang ating mga farmers on documentation? Ano ba yung dapat i-document? Ano ba yung plus and minus kanilang cash flow sheet? No? Of course, some of them, some of the government offices, tinutulungan na sila dun sa identity. Pero merong iba kasing mahirap abutin dahil nasa taas-taas pa sila ng mundo. And for them also, ang kanilang, kailan ka pinanganak? Nung ganito ang sikat ng buwan. So parang okay, manghuhula ba tayo niyan? So, and these are farming communities na encounter namin. So, how do we bring them so that they would be participants of this pagbabago or paglago, no? Walang iwanan theme ng ating gobyerno. Another thing, more on personal, pagka sinabi mong credit rating, tanong mo sa lolo ko, tanong mo sa kapitbahay ko.
Yeah.
Pero ngayon, credit rating is now based on transactional.
Yeah.
Paano hindi ko naman siya kilala, i-credit rating niya ako na ganun ako? Something like that. Just like when we first migrated in Canada, siyempre Pilipino ka, no? Sanay ka sa cash. Ba, sa Canada, nungutang ka, ano pong credit rating nyo? Wala, meron kaming cash dito na ano. Ay, kailangan po may credit rating kayo.
Dapat may credit rating.
Kailangan pong mangutang ka.
Yeah.
To get a credit rating, you have to borrow. So, kapag tinranslate mo yan sa Pilipino dito, lalo na sa rural areas, bakit magiging identity ko yung credit as me, as Joji Pantoja, and that's how the bank would see me. A mere transaction na ang basis is credit rating. So I think kailangan magkaroon ng bridge for educating our farmers. Why is it important to have credit? Katulad nga na sinasabi mo, madali sa kanila yung maliit. Pero kung gusto nila mag-scale up, they needed more financing. So how do we bring them? And I think the closest that they could understand is the paluwagan system.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, the paluwagan system, they put money, di ba? Tapos may susweldo muna. And the rest of the members who are contributing, they are willing to wait para sa kanila naman yun. So, and that's what's happening pagka pumupunta ako sa paluwagan system. Kaya yung role ng mga microfinance, reaching those, I think card bank and other, meron pa yung KMFI ba yun? Na silang inuumpisahan para, katulad ng sinabi ng isang ating reactor na, the unbanked customer.
Right.
Hindi wala silang experience banking. At saka, takot silang pumasok sa bangko, especially the indigenous people.
Right.
Sa itsura pa lang nila, discriminated na agad sila.
Right.
Titignan sila, ito kwento sa akin ng mga farmer, ma'am, nung pumasok po ako sa bangko, tinignan po ako mula ulo hanggang paa. Babae ito ha, babaeng farmer, mula ulo hanggang paa. Hindi po ako pinautang. Kasi wala akong mapakitang document. So yun ang laging nafe-face naming problem dito sa Mindanao, no? At sa ibang lugar na nagtatrabaho kami wherein we deal with coffee farmers na nasa kabundukan. So I think that's one. Another thing would be, hindi lang naman COVID ang naging disaster na fine-face ng mga farmers at kami as a business. No? If you remember, lumindol dito sa Mindanao ng October. Marami ang na-displaced. Maraming farmers ang pinaalis kanilang ancestral domain place. Nasira ang bahay. Bumaksak yung mga puno ng kape dahil nag-landslide. That means wala silang source of income. Now, they wanted to bumangon. No? Pagbangon naman nila, March, COVID, lockdown.
Right.
So, kumbaga nasa stage sila na nakadrely talaga sila sa help ng gobyerno. Dahil they will start from nothing. Nasira ang kanilang animan, nasira ang bahay, but they have the land na kailangan nilang itil uli, kailangan nilang magtanim uli. So, sino magpapautang sa kanila? Wala silang credit ratings. How do we deal with those kinds of problem? Kaya ito pumapasok ngayon yung mga NGOs na magfa-finance kahit kaunti, you know, to capitalize. But I think it's a partnership, it's a collaboration, not only by the lending agencies, but also the government allotting budget para bumangon, no? Kasi kung nakatumba ka, kailangan bumangon ng konti. Pagka nakabangon ka ng konti, andyan siguro yung lending para talagang tunay na makabangon siya. And then, yung business that goes on, pwede na magpatuloy. Now, luckily, for my experience as an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, I have the farm level, I have the processing level, and I have the coffee shop. Yung coffee shop ko ang kinos ko. Why? Physical distancing nga CQ. No one's allowed to go out. So wala kang customer. And you have to think also, sa new normal, less face-to-face contact, cashless society. So ako, as a business owner, I have to think of how do I bring my business to an e-commerce wherein it is cashless, wherein I could answer to be compliant with the government on the social distancing. Another thing would be the challenge. So earthquake, COVID, the challenge would be because of COVID, the Food Safety Act are now being strengthened by the government. So si LTO, FDA, if you are on the food production or medical production, no, that involves processing, kailangan meron ka ng FDA. Now, if you sum up the cost to get that, malaking capitalization. So sa isipan ng mga farmers, how can we rise up with all these things na hindi pa kami nakakabangon, binibigyan na kami agad ng another challenge from the government where we have to comply. So, Food Safety Act, nag-start sa farm level, yung good agricultural practices. I just attended a webinar this morning about that. And kung ako yung farmer na nakikinig, matatakot na ako kasi ang parang sinasabi, mahirap ka magbenta pagka fully implement ng government, mahirap ka magbenta sa groceries kasi si groceries maghahanap na raw, are you practicing good agricultural practice sa farm? Para kami ay safe ang kakainin, wala bang microbes, walang pollutants, yung mga petchay, potatoes. Now think of a farmer complying to all these things, which is maganda naman, Food Safety Act, but no money, no financing. Think of a woman farmer who's encountering all these things, na gusto niya lang makatulong sa negosyo, but has these barriers for growth. So, ang pinaka-important talaga, yung to bring them, to educate yung nasa laylayan nga na sinasabi on how to understand credit rating, the credit society, this transactional side of business na pumapasok tayo. So, yun lang po ang aking ano.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, daghang salamat, Day. So we'll go next to Atagala. Thea Remando C. And Thea is a member and a passionate member of the New Enterprising Women and the Go Negosyo Mentor. She holds an MBA degree from the AIM and describes herself as a Christian who happens to be a wife and a homeschooler to her Odika Iha, a serial entrepreneur and a business consultant. May call on Thea now?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Mr. Jaime. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Actually, when I was invited from the group of women entrepreneurs, I was asking, what is CIC? What does it do? That's honestly, that's my initial reaction. And I will be a panelist. And then when Jeanne called me up and told me, what will I do? That's the only time that I get to research on what you guys are doing. And judging from all the presentation from PCW and right now we as entrepreneurs understand on the NCR point of view. I like what Miss Georgie said there. It's in the agricultural part, but my business is in one of the badly hit. I'm in the food industry and our restaurant is into Anli. So we are really our association also for restaurateur we are somehow in the laylayan na at this time. And thank you for that wonderful for your presentation, because it gave us a breath of fresh air for us entrepreneurs. That, for example, I think it was around July when one of the bank association, one of the financial institution approached our group and asked us if we want to get a loan. But some of our members are less than a year in the business, and they don't have the track record. And some are conservative entrepreneurs who are the one that you said that, will I get credit or will I get cash? Just like what Ms. Georgie said, it's cash is king. So during your presentation, it made me realize the advocacy that what we keep on doing, that there are a lot of online sellers now who pivot. For us, for example, we already pivoted from physical store to an online store and B2B. Everything is done online. But most of them are not registered. So where the advocacy of them making sure that they are documented, they are registered, they pay the right taxes. I could not say more on saying that they should know when to pay the right taxes. But of course, yung reality naman, hindi ko nga alam where will I go? And judging from coming from the slides presented kanina is sa microfinancing sila nagpupunta. You know, an average loan that a woman can get from a microfinance is around 5,000 only. And where will that go? And what they do is usually not even to use it for business. They use it to pay household bills.
Right.
So that's what Go Negosyo naman is doing, to make sure that even if you have 5,000, you use it for to be an entrepreneurial mindset. So ayun yung mga yung mga takeaways ko and that they should, especially for the millennials, for the young ones, that they should take care of their credit rating. Kasi usually nare-realize mo lang yan pagka nasa US ka or you're outside of the Philippines, di ba? I don't even know what my credit rating is. So
check our website.
After this I will. And then yung disparity between men and housewife, kaya most of us are advocating talaga for women not to. It's good to be with the kids, to stay at home, but make sure you also do something. Make sure that you also do something for you to be credit worthy. Just like what happened now. What if nawala ng trabaho si Mister? What will you do?
Right.
Diba? Will you, and you don't even have a team. Diba? So, yun yung mga maganda sa mga narinig ko ngayon. And actually, one of the sad part for us small and medium entrepreneurs is when we learned that the government gave 1 billion for loan sa DTI. Even most of the association don't know. Parang
saka naubos ka agad.
Yun sa yun, 'di ba? Parang syempre it's another topic na bakit 1 billion lang. Ang dami namin, 90% of the economy are same as in our level, 'di ba? And you give us only 1 billion. And we will rely on banks. Of course, I understand what the banks are doing right now and how they tweak, and also how they for example, just like this conversation alone, sa what the market of Miss Georgie, the farmers will not understand. 'Di ba? Parang sa haba ng mga pinag-uusapan natin, they will just say, Miss Georgie, ano nga napag-usapan? I'm sure that's what they're going to say, 'di ba? Parang, Miss Georgie, summarize mo nga sa amin. Or for example, for the resellers that I have, they will just say, Ma'am, ano ba yung ginagawa mo? Ano ba yung ginagawa mo? Even if they have a little amount of money, they don't know how to extend. And so, my 2 cents is for not only for the existing those who tweak yung nasa e-commerce na right now, kasi even the traditional ones, they really have a hard time in making sure na makapasok sila sa e-commerce And additional siguro for you who has the capacity to talk to this institution, huwag naman masyadong malaki yung payment sa GCash.
Yung cut nila,
Yung cut, di ba? Parang,
di ba mga 2% ata ang hinihingi nila, right? 2.5%?
Yes, if someone pay you 5,000, they will be getting that 90 pesos already or above.
There's a threshold, di ba?
Yes, and it hurts us already. Kahit sabihin mo na we don't have a physical store right now because of the circumstances, we also help out other people. Hindi naman,
we're going to cover that in one of our, when we go to e-commerce.
Sige po, I will be one of the panelists again. So those are my takeaway talaga. And thank you for giving us the yung a breath of fresh air talaga on what CIC is doing for us. Kasi most of us don't know, even those who are long time in the business. So
most of my classmates don't know either.
Okay.
From AIM din ako. I have to explain to them what's going on.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Miss Georgia, I just have to say I'm not from AIM, so I have to add a disclaimer that.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we have here, I'm opening the floor now for questions. I know that we're going over time, but I still have 225 people tuned in.
Wow.
But you see, the discussions have been very interesting, and I didn't have the heart to cut short. the
Right.
discussion. Okay, so I have questions here. For Jaime, particularly for CIC, about the CIC. One question is, let me ask it first. The question has to do with the implementation of the national ID system.
Right.
With the national ID system, how can one, how is this issue related with the CIC databasing?
Yeah, that's a great question that actually cuts across both Joji and Thea's questions, no?
Yep.
The basic problem, kung titingnan mo talaga kung ano yung origin ng problem, is paano magpakilala sa nagpapautang. And that's the most apparent kay Joji. In Thea's case naman, once you build up that notion of paano ka magpapakilala, the first thing you have to do is pakilala mo yung sarili mo, which is identity. No? And for starting entrepreneurs, kahit sa urban area, minsan wala talaga yung ID. Kaya nga very famous yung postal ID kasi madaling makuha. But the question is, pagkakatiwalaan ba yung postal ID nung nagpapautang? That's again the bigger question. So the national ID is a fantastic solution. And to George's point, the CIC does not claim to be able to go all the way to the bottom. That's not within yet the scope kasi database nga. But the national ID is supposed to bridge that gap. Now, for example, and this might be one of the failings of a super structured bureaucracy, no? How do you give someone a birthday when he doesn't know his birthday? That's a great question. And sometimes the answer is just take whatever birthday he says, and then from that point forward, yun na ang birthday niya. You know, whether he's 100 years old or 18 years old, if he says he's 18 years old, just give him the card, right? Sometimes kasi we strive to be accuracy, we strive to be so accurate that we fail to be practical. And I think the approaches to many of these problems, national ID included, has to have a sense of practicality. Like, and we like for example sa CIC, ang daming walang ID sa microfinance. So anong ginawa namin? So may utang sa microfinance pero walang ID, so hindi makapasok sa CIC database. Pues, di kami yung gumawa ng ID para sa kanila. Di makakuha ng TIN, di makakuha ng SSS kasi walang trabaho, walang GSIS. CIC ang nag-provide. Now, fortunately, that's within our mandate. And our mandate also is to serve MSMEs. So, obligado kaming gawin. The challenge for other government agencies is to hone their including the NSA, because they're now in charge of giving the IDs, is to hone their policies to distribute this national ID to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. You can be fraudulent all the way up to the time you get your national ID. But the moment you get your national ID, pasok lahat ng biometrics mo, pasok lahat ng identity mo, pasok lahat ng picture mo, wala ka ng ibang identity. So it shouldn't matter. I shouldn't have to prove who I am before. But the moment I get my ID, that's who I am now and who I will be forever. So if that's, the national ID will be most successful, I think, if it goes that way, and it will address the issues of the farmer, because it doesn't matter if he doesn't know who he is, but as long as he knows what his name is and where he lives and he has biometrics, he can become an identity. And that goes the same for Tay as well. The development of the digital footprint will be there. So national ID, very important. Good luck to the government in doing it, but it has to rationalize to put functionality over perfection. Let's put it that way.
A related question is I think comes from a lending institution. The most common problem they encounter in offering credit services is the lack of primary identification.
Again.
Yeah, so that's related.
Same thing.
How can you resolve it? You have resolved it. You can
we've resolved it. So to that financial institution, kung magsasubmit po kayo sa CIC, basta lang may customer ID kayo, yung sarili nyong internal number, pag sinubmit niyo yun sa CIC, lalagyan na po namin ng number. So pag sinearch niyo po yung tao na kailangan yung hanapan ng credit report, all you need to do is use your own customer number, kahit walang TIN, SSS, or GSIS. Pero by the way, dahil nga maraming mga transport cooperative na walang ID kundi driver's license, tsaka yung iba wala ng mga TIN, SSS, GSIS kasi UMID na, we've expanded our data, our primary IDs to include the driver's license and the UMID. So ang dami nun, daming mga kooperatiba na puro driver's license lang ang meron. And so again, from a practical perspective, the CIC is trying to be practical about the solution. And I think that should be the approach to all of these things.
Mayroon dito question. So I've actually clustered the questions. Would CIC or is CIC now taking information from utility companies such as telcos, electricity distributors, water distributors, etc., to establish payment habits?
The problem with utilities, even the problem with traditional utilities like water and electricity, tama yung sinabi ni ng ating friends from Union Bank. Importante na magpakita na meron kang water bill, and that's good from a business perspective kasi yung hindi naman tatakbo yung negosyo, di ba? The problem with the problem with utility bills from a personal perspective is that how many people actually transferred the ownership of the utility that was sa lolo pa nila nakarehistro? Or paano pag umuupa ka? Pag umuupa ka, hiwalay ka na metro na nabibili lang nung nagpapaupa sa hardware store, may tubig ka na, pero yung total bill ng tubig, dun pa rin sa pangalan nung nagpapaupa. Maraming structural changes that have to happen in terms of billing and collection of utilities before the CIC can onboard it. Kasi otherwise, kung hindi sa'yo yung billing number, mapupunta lang yung creditworthiness dun sa nagpapaupa sa'yo. So there are these challenges. No? So in fact, even with banks, there were parang structural challenges in terms of ID. But definitely in terms of utilities, the structural challenges are larger because there's no motivation for the utility user to spend. Kunyari, Meralco ata, bago ka magpapalit ng transfer of ownership, magbabayad ka pa ng 30,000. So who would want to do that? Diba? So may mga issues talaga. We would love to be able to use historical data in terms of utilities, but I think the banks are doing it as well, which is why it's important to synergize what the CIC has and what other information is out there to assist the lenders and the borrowers also to prove their creditworthiness.
Yeah, because many, especially micro entrepreneurs, access credit from micro-lending institutions like NGOs, foundations, and cooperatives. And it's important for them to have a credit record. So are these organizations part of your submitting entities?
Yung mga MFIs, pasok na sila through the Midas group. I think the largest member of Midas, I think, is CARD, and then another large group. So microfinance, very heavy into this. They know that their people need, their borrowers need credit data. Because, to be fair, the microfinance is no longer the 5, 10, 20,000 pesos. They give loans up to 3 million, 5 million. Malalaki na talaga itong mga microfinance. So that's why nga, ang lagi naming sinasabi, join a co-op. Get some microfinance loan. And with all due respect to Ms. Georgie, I understand yours is very peculiar, very specific yung condition mo. Pero the theory here is if the financial institutions can get such a good level of confidence in bulk of their borrowers, that means yung provisioning nila for risk for loans goes down, which means it allows them a greater latitude to onboard more and more clients further and further down the economic scale. That in theory, at some point, as the government starts to bring digital identities to the lower levels of the pyramid, and the banks and other financial institutions start bringing down their thresholds for lending because of a high level of confidence in the statistical overview of that particular market, at some point, magtatagpo yung dalawa. And to answer Ms. Georgie's question, the challenge really for financial institutions is, can they get a farmer who has a track record with a company like yours, for example, Coffee for Peace, and analyze the statistical prevalence of default among your specific members? Kasi alam mo naman yung condition nila kasi part ka ng kanilang life cycle of buying and paying. If there's a bank that wants to spend the time to analyze your data, they can actually build a profile of your farmers and use that first for your farmers, then begin extending it outwards to other farmers. So the CIC is only the first point in data collection. Our friends from Union Bank already said that they're already exploring alternative methods of data collection. And I think that's really the more powerful one for the new borrowers in the market. And I hope they address the issues of Georgie and Thea over time.
Yeah, and it will also probably, Javi probably should highlight that aside from the data banking, CIC has business development and communication services.
The educational campaigns.
Yeah, Will you say something about that?
Oh, yeah,
This
sure.
is in relation to Georgie's point.
Yeah. So in relation to Georgie, the challenge really is, you're right, how to educate, how to make sure that they know how to engage. First, the one I want to address, if that's the point, financial institutions have to make themselves available to the market. In other words, kahit ano pang bihis ng tao niyan, they should welcome the person in and make that person feel comfortable in the context of who that person is. A quick story is 20 years ago, I went to a casino in Baguio and I saw people nakapaalang, maputik pa yung paa pero may bayong puno ng pera. Mga minero na nakakabenta lang ng gamit nila. So obviously, just because you're dressed in air quotes poorly, that doesn't mean you're poor. And just because you've never gone into a bank, that doesn't mean you're not credit worthy. So the banks have to be the one to reach out, I think, and they have to find a value there. The CIC can do so much, but really the lender is king.
Okay.
They're the ones who decide who their market is.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jaime. Now, I have some questions here actually for the financial institutions. Are there any, one question is, are there specific requirements of banks for aspiring women workers who want to establish a credit line with banks?
Specific requirements, it can vary from bank to bank, no? But
Yeah.
the general answer would be, well, one is the identity, and two is to have that, it's more of a proof of your paying capacity. So that's where it really matters. How will you be able to sustain the loan? If it's let's say a 10-year loan or 20-year loan, it boils down to how stable is your source of income. So whether you're employed or whether you have a business na lucrative, and even if you're just a startup, so you won't have that financial statements that traditionally is being required, at least a business concept that will have a business plan to show that
the plan.
Kasi that's where I was saying na we're expanding. We know that there was history, particularly for existing customers who had credit before, but with this COVID, whatever we know of before, we have to be open na it might not necessarily be the whole story about this customer. So we have to see what he will do in the future to be able to sustain if we lend him some money. So it's the resiliency, it's that it's to one of the panelists issues na it's, and I think na mention na rin ni Mr. Jaime, it's the ecosystem or the supply chain that I was mentioning a while ago, na if there would be some sort of, kung dati ang tawag, locally tawag natin padron, to be able to say, I guarantee that this person will pay this loan.
Your patron
Or even without the collateral, the fact that there's somebody guaranteeing the quality or the character of this person, there naging medyo high-tech na lang siya ngayon. Na-profile mo na yung tao, but at the same time, having that guarantee that he will actually be able to repay the loan for whatever term it is.
Yeah, there was a question asked that for an entrepreneur who's just starting and who hasn't gotten a business permit yet, because it's not, because the question actually is, for a very modest startup, capital is really short. The most a woman entrepreneur can do is register in the DTI, but due to the lack of resources, cannot apply for a business permit. So because of that, they don't qualify for government programs, so they go to loan sharks. So, but how about banks? Do banks require starting entrepreneurs to have a business permit? I think
Well,
that's
that's the difference of retail and micro or SME, no? In retail or consumer kasi, the fact that you have an ID, whether it's a
yeah,
TIN
yeah,
or
yeah.
a driver's license, that's enough to prove your identity. But on a business, on an entrepreneur, it's the identity of the business that will be the proof that it really exists. So whether it's a business permit from DTI or a mayor's permit, kasi may mga locally, per LGU, they would have certain
Yes.
requirements naman or documents that even a particular sari-sari store may have this particular permit to actually operate in that neighborhood. So that is possible also. So again, it goes back to existence nung entity or nung business.
That's probably the reason why, as Hazel said, that you also alluded to, that sometimes tinatago nila yung real purpose of the loan.
Right.
Imbis
That's right.
na business loan, inaano nila as retail, baski yung kukuha sila ng loan para sa truck o sa van, kunyari, gagamitin nila sa business, pero actually sasabihin lang nila gagamitin nila para wag na silang kukuha ng masyado ng documentation. Kaya, skewed yung ano, I think that's the reason why skewed masyado yung records din sa CIC database. Ano, Jaime?
Could be.
Pakarami, kunti lang yung business loans na reflect. Karamihan na business loans. Well, we really are 30 minutes late. But before, I have few questions for Carmen. Do we have a standard definition of women-owned businesses? And there is another, the other question is, which is for Jaime, has there been done, has a gender analysis been done with the CIC data? Okay, Carmen
first.
Yeah.
Carmen first.
With regards to identifying women-owned, it's based on the registration. So it's either they are sole proprietors registered under DTI, so the owner being a woman, and then for SEC registration for corporations, so who is the president identified, and then for cooperatives also. So when the cooperatives manager is a woman, so those are how we refer to the enterprises. So depending on leadership.
And that is also how you sort of qualified who can be part of the Great Women Project, right?
Yes, po.
Okay, thank you very much, Carmen. Okay, Jaime, the second question.
So on that matter, clearly we've started already the gender analysis. And in fact, I like the data of Hazel so much. Na I think baka nga gusto nating mag-pilot between Thea and Hazel, and maybe even Carmen, if we can start collaborating siguro on some type of gender correlation. Kasi Toyota has great data. I think it will, and obviously they have enough statistics to manage the gender skews in their data. I think once we refine, once we try to pinpoint ano yung hinahanap ba natin para ano yung policy ang gusto nating i-support, whether with the BSP or from let's say Toyota lang or even Union Bank, I think we can come up with some pilot studies. Pero yung nakita nila dito, this is just the beginning kasi we can start, once we get our business intelligence tool, we can start drilling down to the very, very specific. And I look forward talaga to working with all of our speakers here today to see whether the data reflects the actual on the ground and start building maybe policy recommendations to Congress, to NEDA, to BSP to support the female gender in terms of lending.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, but I have to close the open forum. There are still like 20, 30, 40 questions. Anyways, at this point, I think we would like to thank our panelists. Before I call on Craig to give the closing remarks, I would like to thank Jaime, Carmen, Rani, Hazel, Georgie, and Thea.
Very welcome.
Yes, and I think the Respond team has prepared virtual certificates. But I think they will send it. Okay, shall we show them now?
Save the trees. No more paper certificates.
Yeah. But we will send it to you. Shall we, Jazz, can we go to, yeah. Okay, this is Certificate of Appreciation presented to Mr. Jaime Casto P. Garchitorena for imparting valuable insights as speaker for the first WGDP webinar series on women's economic empowerment, improving women's access to credit to the CIC Credit Report held on August 28, 2020, signed by Enrico Basilio, Chief of Party, UPPAF-RESPOND.
Thank you
very much, Jaime.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. The next certificate is presented to Carmen, Ms. Carmen Roceli M. Lopez, again, for imparting, etc., etc.
Thank you, Ms. Jeanne. Thank you, Respond.
Thank you very much, Carmen. The third certificate is given to Georgie Pantoa for etc., etc. Then we also have a certificate of appreciation for Thea Rimando C. And next, please, Turani Rules Venison. Thank you also for etc., etc. And the last certificate, last but not the least, is to Hazel Tan Lopez. It's been a pleasure working with you. Okay. Now to close the webinar, may I call on the Executive Director of the Philippine Commission on Women, Atty. Yuzon-Chavez.
Thank you, Ms. Jeanne. In behalf of the Philippine Commission on Women, in partnership with UPPAF-RESPOND and the Credit Information Corporation, we would like to thank you for attending the first of the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative webinar series on women's economic empowerment. We know that these are difficult times for everyone. We are still in quarantine and the threat of COVID-19 remains. I understand how important these conversations are given the problems of micro, small, and medium enterprises are currently facing. As presented by GREAT Women Project 2 and as discussed by Mr. Jaime, our women micro enterprises need help and assistance during this time, especially in accessing credit and other financial resources. We hope that the discussions today can translate into plans in order to assist enterprises, particularly enterprises led by women who are not just into reviving their businesses, but are also juggling multiple tasks at home, such as running the household, taking care of the children, doing chores, and other things. The assistance of various stakeholders is needed by women enterprises so they could bounce back and rehabilitate their enterprises during this pandemic. Again, thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next discussions. Happy National Heroes Day weekend to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're muted, Miss Jeanne. You're muted.
Did I wish your certificate and blah, blah, blah? We also have, senior moment. We also have a certificate. Yes, thank you very much.
Wow,
Now, I'll read it from the beginning. Certificate of Appreciation hereby presented to Atty. Kristine Rosary E, Yuzon-Chavez for imparting valuable insights as etc., etc. Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you, Miss Jeanne.
Yeah, this is just the first. Remember, we have 4 more.
Yes.
Okay.
Several.
To our viewing, we still have 190 viewers right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good weekend. God bless.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Hazel.
Thank you, Miss Jean.
Thank you, Georgie. Thank you. Jaime, I think we need to talk. Okay.
Yeah, we need to talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.